Danette, hi. It's so good to see you.
It's so great to see you. How are you, Sarah?
Oh, I am so good. And I'm so excited to talk to you here today on the Focused Athlete podcast. And I would like to just introduce you to our audience. And today we get to talk to Danette Leighton. She is currently the CEO of the Women's Sports Foundation and previously a long history in sports. So previously the chief marketing officer for the Pac-12 conference, and before that, experience in the NBA and WNBA, and just really excited to learn from you today.
Well, I appreciate the introduction. It is my pleasure to be here, and I look forward to the conversation.
I'd love to hear from you, just kicking us right out the gate on emotional intelligence. And I know that this is a topic that I feel like you embody and you get it. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about how your emotions impact you as a leader.
Well, I appreciate that. I was very lucky to get exposed to emotional intelligence training when I was actually in the NBA and the WNBA and working for the Sacramento Kings and Sacramento Monarchs. We did some in-house kind of, training, and it was great for the staff. But then I had the pleasure of meeting somebody while I was there that really kind of exposed me to what I hope I live my daily life by, but am definitely appreciative for now more than ever before, because it has been not just a professional blessing, but a personal blessing. So much so that my husband went through it right after I went through it, and taught me a lot of tools that I didn't have in my toolbox before. So, at a high level for me, emotional intelligence really helped me hold the mirror up in
Mm,
ways that I hadn't held the mirror up before, and recognizing what maybe I saw as weaknesses of my own were just a part of my style, and also help me understand better how I can adapt myself to be a better leader, a better manager, a better wife, a better mother, but do it in a way that is positive and not something that makes me, in the past where I might have been self-conscious about certain things that I knew were my weaknesses, but I like to say my growth opportunities. I think it just really opened my eyes to knowledge. And I think knowledge that I didn't have before, and the importance of authentic relationships. Obviously, I always knew were important, but knowing how to use your emotions as a part of your communication toolbox as much as how you make decisions is really incredibly important.
mm. I love that you brought up the authenticity element because sometimes there's this balance between who do we want to be or how we're showing up at work as a leader, um, in taking into account how we're feeling in our personal life. And so but when we're one person, and so we carry these emotions between all of our roles. And so what have you learned? How do you balance that? How can you be your true, authentic you at work? And how does that help you as a leader?
Yeah, I think this was a big kind of aha for me when I became, a vice president for the first time. I have worked in sports my whole life. I think a lot of women who obviously work in many industries, you have a tendency to, as you advance in your career, you see less and less people that look like you, and that was something that I definitely started to recognize once I became a vice president. And I was also responsible for a men's sport and a women's sport in the role that I had. And I always questioned the fact that I was a woman and a leader, and I wanted to be respected as the male leaders were respected. And it had absolutely nothing to do with how the men treated me. They treated me fantastically. I had a great boss, I had great male allies. It was more what I put on myself, that I didn't want to be judged
Mhm.
for being emotional or being a stereotypical female as it was defined. But yet my natural self and my authentic self, if I look at it from, a disc model, is I'm a high I. I really, really value working with people. I care about people. I'm very empathetic towards people. I want people to be happy. I want people to be engaged. At the same time, I need to help hold people accountable to doing the roles. And I'm also a high D. I like results and like getting results done. So my style, my personality would have a tendency to be this combination of, my D would come out much stronger in my professional life, because that's how I was judged, and that's how I believe my, how I received my, you know, whether it was my merits or however, that's how I was going to get job done. And I would hold back the other side of me because I didn't want to be defined as a stereotypical, I guess, back then female. And I realized that was just the wrong way to look at it all. And what made me a unique leader and define me for who I am is being my authentic self, is that having that combination of being okay with my own emotions when I had them, being okay with the fact that I could say, this is my day today. This didn't go well. But at the end of the day, I think it always showed people that I'm going to own every mistake I ever make. I'm going to own it for my team, in which my team makes a mistake, and being okay to be that transparent and that open with people. I think sometimes is a lot of people don't realize how empowering it is. And actually, it's more empowering to be your authentic self than to not be. And I've always been that person, is what you see is what you get. So I think it was just starting to realize that that tool of recognizing the power of emotional intelligence actually helped me be a better leader than it being a disservice to me and thinking that I couldn't behave a certain way.
I love that. And I'm imagining because when we can be our authentic self, like people feel it. And that is how we build trust with the people that we care about, the people that we work with, the people in our lives. So when you think about, managing pressure, you've held some high level roles and you've got some real serious responsibility in those roles. How do you manage your emotions under pressure and under stress?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think we've all had our ups and downs. And, I've had some, in the roles that I've had, most of what I've done has always been very visible. So very visible to a fan base, very visible to the public to see. And this was well before social media. So I would say everybody saw our mistakes magnified all the time. So if we made a mistake, everybody saw it. At the same time, when we're in kind of my area, everything that we do is very subjective. So everybody had an opinion about what you did. So you had to learn to have a pretty thick skin. And so I would say that's where my high I would have a hard time and would definitely take things personally versus recognizing that this is okay. Everybody can have their opinion. You just got to make sure that you have that strength to learn from what went well and also own what didn't go well. So I think for me, in the end, what I think has helped me the most in difficult situations is just being really transparent
Yeah.
and having the ability to. I've owned every mistake I would like to think I've owned every mistake that I've made or teams have made.
Mhm.
And sometimes even when you're having a conversation with another person that may have met you for the first time or had a bad experience with your organization or something in the past, is owning that behavior. And just, I think people are taken aback when you say sorry or
Mhm.
you apologize or you say, I'm sorry that happened to you. And, this is where we're hoping to go. And just owning it. And I think when you have emotional intelligence, you realize how empowering that is. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of people are afraid to be wrong or are afraid to make a mistake. And I think that can be really disheartening for anybody who's a creative or anybody who wants to be innovative or be entrepreneurial. You have to be willing to take those risks. And as a marketer, we call it, if you choose not to be that way, then everything you do is going to be very vanilla versus taking some of those risks. So you have to get okay with failure and you
Mhm.
have to get okay with making mistakes and knowing how to navigate through it. And I think I was fortunate enough. I mean, maybe I didn't feel this way early on, but everybody saw our mistakes. So it was people are going to see it regardless, and people had opinion regardless. So you had to have a thick skin. But having more tools in my toolbox, once I kind of understood emotional intelligence better, definitely allowed me to kind of navigate that and be more resilient through it.
Mhm. And I'm hearing resilience. I'm also hearing kind of where we started with that vulnerability piece of being okay with making a mistake and saying, I'm sorry.
It's something that is so easy that
Right.
I think a lot of people, especially in the professional work life, are afraid to say.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter what level you're at. I know if it was somebody who worked for me, it doesn't matter where they are in a hierarchy. I so want somebody to just come up to me and be accountable. And if they made a mistake, tell me they did it more so than trying to hide it from me. Like, that's the worst part. It's like, I
Right.
have more respect if you tell me you made a mistake.
Right.
And I think that's the part that, and as long as you have leaders that are there to coach and there to be empathetic to that and realize we're all humans, I
Yeah.
think that's the part that is the most important part about being an empathetic and empathetic leader. It's not about being somebody that's overly sensitive or overly emotional. It's just having empathy and knowing what it takes to have those types of, hard conversations, but also recognizing the person that you work with as a human.
Hmm.
Last I checked, none of us are perfect.
Right. And again, like the connection that's built and the trust that's built through being okay with someone making a mistake. And um, I love that you brought in creativity also. Like that's part of like we're not perfect, but if we don't allow ourselves to kind of think freely or go to the edge, innovation's not going to happen. And so you as a leader being okay, like definitely heading in that more of that direction of I want to know and it's okay.
But
You're
it takes a while. I can understand on your journey, your career.
mm-hmm,
It can be scary to feel that way. And also I've been, lucky enough to be, at a C-suite level for a long time now, but I can understand on my journey where I never wanted to fail for my boss. So
yeah.
I know how hard it would have been for me to fail at certain points of my career. And I think that's why I've really tried to look at it from the other side of it. But also in recognizing when you make a mistake that you're coachable to be able to see what to not to do again,
Mhm.
and that it's not something that's a continuous thing. And
Right.
it's also recognizing areas where are going to be maybe less impactful to the organization. Like there's different ways of looking at it, but at the same, it's about making sure you're teaching and you're coaching, but you have that open and honest conversation that can work both ways so that people can understand why it's important to be able to allow others to do that and yourself to do that, especially as a leader.
Hmm. You're such a positive person, Danette. And how would you say this positivity? Because you take, I mean, it's easy, our brains are wired to look for things that are wrong and the mistakes and the problems. And it takes energy and effort to look at the other side. And so how do you do that for one thing? And how do you think it impacts, say, your employees, the people working for you, or your family even?
Wow. So I would say naturally, I'm definitely a full, half cup full person. I'm definitely not the other way. I've always just had an optimistic, positive outlook on life and have always kind of felt like you can get through anything. And I will give credit to my grandfather. He was the most positive human being I've ever met in my entire life. And I don't think ever didn't have a positive outlook on life. And I think, you can get thrown a lot of challenges through your life, no matter what that is. And if you have a positive outlook towards it, there's something better, or there's something to be learned from it, or there's something that you can better another individual, then it's just a healthier way to live. And I get a lot of joy out of that. And I don't want to be the other way. Being negative is just not, it's just not a place that I like to spend a lot of time in. Doesn't mean that I don't get there. Doesn't
Right.
mean that I don't have my days. Doesn't mean that I don't sometimes want to throw in the towel. Like I have those days too, but I think the majority of time I try to stay in a positive space. And I think that kind of is innate in who I am. But I've also seen throughout my life and throughout my career that when I stay positive, I can get through harder things a lot better. If
Mhm.
I go the other direction, it really hinders me and puts me in a box where I get stuck.
Yeah.
And no matter what that potential problem is, I do better when I stay in that positive space. And I can get through it faster when I stay in that positive space. So I think that's something that I've learned over time too is I don't do well and you don't get through it when you stay in that negative zone.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that no matter if you are kind of a half glass full person like me, or maybe the other way, if you define yourself that way, when you get more reps and more,
Ah,
ways to do this, you realize you get through it a lot easier.
ah.
And I think at the end of the day, for me, no matter if it's work or life, even with the mistakes that I've made throughout my life, I want to always feel like I can put my head down at night on my pillow and feel okay with how I got through something or how I did something. So I've always kind of had that North Star of I have always kind of lived and worked to my personal principles and values, and that's always been my North Star. And even when I've had difficult times in my career, I've used that as kind of my guiding light, even when I've gotten smacked in the face, not physically or literally, but more challenged, whether it's through different things in work or different circumstances or not getting a job or whatever that may be. It's always allowed me to say that wasn't meant to be, or hey, something better is going to be around the corner. And I think if you have that mindset, it keeps you out of a different space that can take you down a rabbit hole of negativity.
Yes. And sometimes it's not so easy in those moments to flip into that positivity. And like for me, sometimes it's helpful to just take a step outside of the space, like walk outside, get outside the office. And I just heard you say, um, you know, your mindset is kind of how you reframe the moment. Is there any other tool that you kind of go to in the moment when things are tough that you can, when you recognize, okay, this is tough right now, how do you flip into that positivity?
Well, it's funny because I will do some of the things that you and I like doing together. I like going for a hike or going for a walk. I sometimes when things are really rough and I don't have an answer to something right away, I've got to step away and I have to put myself in a frame of mind that reminds me of, a good friend of mine wrote this book that said, be where your feet are and be mindful of that, but also recognize that you need a bit of a break. I'm not going to always have a solution to a problem right away. And for me, getting out in nature has always been very helpful for me to just be able to kind of, it's probably why I love living in the state that we both live in, is the ability to just be in the hills in a matter of minutes and be able to just take a deep breath and realize, okay, it's going to be fine. And then also realizing, especially when it comes to your profession, a job's a job. And if you can put your mindset that it's still just a job, it's not everything, you're going to have bigger issues you have to get through. And last year, I had a lot of big personal challenges. As you know, I battled cancer last year, and that was a big test of staying positive. But I know if I wouldn't have stayed positive, it would have been a hard go to get through whatever, whatever cards I had been dealt during that diagnosis. It's just really helped me in both my professional, personal, and being a mom too, is keeping that type of attitude and positivity and having an emotional intelligence mindset is so much bigger than just a professional career. It's kind of how you live life.
I love that. I I have learned and I continue to learn so much from you. And I want to just thank you for being here today. It's just always a pleasure. And I look forward to our next walk out in nature.
I do too. Thanks for having me so much, and thanks for doing what you're doing because it's so important.
Thank you, Danette. Talk to you soon.
Bye.